Hello, everyone. Good afternoon today. My name is Allison Elsner, and I'm the CEO of the San Bernardino County Medical Society, as well as Inland Wellness Information Network, or IWIN. We are so excited to have you join us for our fifth session in the Food, Health, and Cultura series, Teens and What Your Parents Didn't Tell You About Nutrition. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the program director and lead presenter for today's session, Dr. Angie Romero-Neeson, MD. She's a quadruple board certified physician who is passionate about advancing health equity by amplifying the expert voices in medicine, where health, nutrition, culture, and lifestyle medicine can intersect and advance chronic disease management in a culturally adaptive manner. Welcome, Dr. Romero-Neeson.
Thank you. Thank you, and welcome to our fifth of 6 webinars. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This is the information for the CME for those of you who want to get the CME, and then these are a few of our objectives. I want to briefly introduce my amazing Latino colleagues who are here with me today. So we have today Dr. Ricardo Correa. He is a clinical epidemiologist, endocrinologist, and expert in diabetes and obesity, particularly for Latino health at the Cleveland Clinic. His teaching and engagements extend through media, nationally and internationally, as well as various organizations, including the American Medical Association. Dr. Ilan Shapiro, he is a pediatrician by training, but really an international leader in Latino health and wellness throughout Latin America. He sits at the intersections of media, policy, and healthcare organizations, where he is actively challenging the media's Latino narrative, as well as working to increase young Latinos to become the next generation of healers. And then lastly, we have Dr. Antonio Miranda, who's been with us since the beginning. He is an RD, diabetes educator, PhD, and also the world's expert on Latino health behavior, specifically machismo studies. He's a national speaker, consultant, and now author, which he will talk about. And he works with many health experts while residing in the greater Dallas area. And again, these are the objectives. We hope that you can explore a variety of ways, habits, and ingredients in food preparations. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And I just want to recap for those of you who have not come to any of our sessions. Our session 1, for those of you who please don't miss it. The first one was really about setting the stage of the Latino narrative from our lived experiences in medicine. There are many misconceptions, and we dived into all of them. And it was really interesting to point out that the Latino GDP, especially now within our political climate. So I would have you listen to that. Our second session, we dived into the higher rates of diabetes and the imperfect tools that we have in medicine to diagnose this. But really, we talked more about the cardiometabolic health and the tools that we have to tackle it in a culturally appropriate manner. The third session was a dive into how our ancestors, who are the true blue zoners, and I can't wait for one day to see that on Netflix, but if we just invested in our communities, I think we will create our first Latino blue zone. The fourth session focused on the foundation of a good dietary pattern and a good home, starting with moms, mothers, the mamas, and the children, the next generation. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that we are the fastest growing population. We have about an added 1 million Latino babies born in the US each year. And when I say Latino, I also include Latinas, Latine. It's just a global term. Many of us may call ourselves Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish heritage, but we're not all the same. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And so now this brings us to the teen edition. And for those of you who don't know me, my animo, my passion for medicine, health, food, and cultura really led to this series of webinars. And it was created around this particular session. And why? Because I feel like this is a gift. This is a gift in medicine. So the picture on the left is me and my family's rancho in northern Mexico in Chihuahua. I remember visiting as a kid. My mom grew up on a rancho before she immigrated. And my uncles some of my family still lives there. I remember praying with my grandma for rain because we were really affected by severe droughts, and that affected the harvest, and that affected how the economic situation was. I remember my family immigrating to the States because of a better economic situation, as the fruits of the labor were getting a lot harder. I also remember telling my mom as a teenager in the fat-free craze how avocados were too high in fat, and how embarrassing is that, right? But you know, as a teen, you think you know everything. And so again, when I talk about this, I'm living and I'm telling you authentically. I actually put it on my logo. So that middle picture is my logo that I have on my website. But really, I want to kind of go through it because I've actually never explained this to a live active audience. So let me explain my logo. Very proud of it. The stethoscope represents my love for medicine. And with that DNA strand, really only taking a small portion, because as an expert in lifestyle and culinary medicine, I remind my patients that your genetics is only playing a small role in your health. And then it's up to you to decide the rest. The avocado center reminds me of my Latino roots, my love for family, and my gratitude for my mom, who always was right about avocados. The center of the earth serves as the lens in which I live authentically. Through all I do and what I do and how I practice in and out of the office, I look at the world through the lens of a planetary, human, and climate health. And then the picture on the right, you know, I do a lot of cooking demonstrations in the community, and this is a picture of a YMCA family health class that I did. I taught families as young as 2 years old and then as old as 17. And of course, I gave the larger job on the stove for the older kids. And here he is, you know, listening with his earbuds, but he was following directions to the recipe. He kept his earbuds the whole time, but he was actively participating in the kitchen, and I just loved it. And so I just love this population. So let me go to the next slide to highlight a couple more things about this generation Alpha and Z. Like I said, I'm a family medicine physician, and to me, and I tell all my residents, all my medical students, they are a gift to us in medicine. And this is why. This generation is the Latino generation is the fastest growing population in the United States. And according to the Pew Research Center, 1 in 4 Gen Zs are Latino. And then the states that make up the largest states that have Latino populations, Texas, California, Florida, Latinos make up 30% of the population. And what I love about this culture, the recent mainstream culture, is that in the last 4 or 5 years, the most streamed artist on Spotify are actually Latino. So our music and the Spanish culture has actually become socially and culturally intersected with all generations, all ethnicities. And so what this generation grows up with is a globally aware, they went through a pandemic, they knew about diversity, they know about inclusion, and they actually get to live authentically. So when I say authentically, is that, you know, when you survey them, a third of them say that they don't really care about money. They really want to have a purpose. They want to make sure that they make a difference to society and the planet. So they're looking at jobs with the foundation of passion and purpose. They're super inventive, they're creative. And what I love is that I never got to have that hyper-cultural love for cultura. When I was growing up, it was always like, you know, are you from there? Are you from Mexico? Or are you from the United States? You didn't feel like you were from there. You didn't feel like you were from here. But this generation actually gets it. They're not assimilating. They're not rejecting American culture, but rather they're inventing something so beautiful that melds the two. They create a proudly, I am from here and from there. And, you know, it's actually evidenced by Spanglish. If you see the ads on news or media, there's a lot of Spanglish now that is mainstream. And so it is important for me to highlight the voices of our Latino experts today, because we need to serve this community authentically. Go ahead and go to the next slide. But in honest truth, I can start off with all this optimism, but I want to bring it back to something that's real and reality and truth. So go ahead and put in the poll there what you think the reality of our food insecurity in our populations of Latino teens are. And then I'm going to pass the torch over to Dr. Ricardo Correa. We'll give the poll a little bit of time. Somehow I'm not able to engage in the poll. I don't know if anybody else is. Let's see if we can, oh, there it is. Can we launch it again? Okay, there we go. So do you think it's 10%, 20%, 50%? Okay, we got a couple there. And another thing that's important to highlight is even when Latinos are food insecure, 25% of them are not likely to ask for help because of barriers such as culinary literacy, such as shame, such as what do I do with these ingredients? This doesn't look like the food that I have at home and that I cook with. What do I do with it? How do I navigate the healthcare system? So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And then next slide and take it away, Dr. Correa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nielsen. It was a great introduction. I think that we can feel the passion that you have for all of these topics. So really, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. And it's a real pleasure for me to talk about this. As you mentioned, there is many positive things happening with this generation, but there is also the big problem that we have been just following for all the systemic discrimination that has happened more to our community in this country. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you today is basically about food insecurity and thinking about as a social determinant of health as part of our social life. And sometimes this is not being addressed in the visit with your provider. It's just because it's time consuming and healthcare system only allows us to have certain amount of time with patients. But this is such an important part of the health of a person that really should be addressing every single visit with your provider. So what really people that are more prone to have food insecurity are people that live below the federal level of poverty, people that are unemployed, people that live in food deserts. And we can see that many of the places where the Latino population live, that is in the urban areas, they are considered food desert because all the things that are close by are just industries and there is no green nearby. So we have to think, and more predisposed people that have limited transportation and disability. So really here, just answering a little bit more about, we know that in general, as Latinos, we make 19.5% of the population as per the last census. But we will see that the consequences that this systemic discrimination has happened on our communities has caused that our food insecurity is higher than the rest, and our prevalence of obesity due to many of other factors is higher than the rest compared with the whites. And this is being shown in the US in the last data. So can we go to the next slide? Okay, so this is a little bit of food insecurity in our community. So think about our language barriers, our cultural barriers, all of that influencing the environment of food in the US. So we know that before the pandemic, we were the community that faced twice food insecurity than non-Hispanic white, represented approximately 20% of our kids having some kind of hunger. So this is very important. We also know that Latinx or Latino population during they are the ones that are employed mainly in hospitality industry. So they were the ones that were more hit during the COVID-19. So this is why we are seeing more consequences right now of more food insecurity in the Latino community. So next slide. And what impact have this food insecurity? Because if we think about it, we are like, okay, but that's food. So what many things in our life. So obesity, it's one, and we are going to talk a little bit more about that, but also diabetes. So patients that have inability to have healthy food will have predisposition to have insulin resistance and diabetes. We know that the stress that the situation causes in the person will raise blood pressure, will raise cholesterol problems, and then this will end in cardiovascular disease. And we know that this population that has food insecurity have more predisposition to be depressed, and this will just prolong all the cycle that we were talking about. Next slide. So this is just the cycle where everything starts with not having decent or good food in your table every day. Then what we're trying to do is trying to cope those strategies and change our eating behavior to the point that some people only eat once a day, but all the calories that they can take because they don't know when they are going to eat again. So this will cause more chronic disease, as we will talk about all the comorbidities that we were telling, cardiovascular, depression, heart, diabetes, and will increase the expenditure in the healthcare system. And then this just continue the cycle where the income decrease. We don't have any more things to buy good food, and then the cycle continue and our food insecurity continue. So next slide. So, and I brought this because if we always, when we think about obesity, we don't relate this with food insecurity, but we have to be a quick correlation and more for the next generations. So if we think about this is what is the state of food insecurity in the US. Look which are the states that have more food insecurity, the South states. And in the next slide, you can see that those are the states with majority of prevalence of obesity. So there is a direct correlation with food insecurity and obesity. We know that people have more predisposition of bad habit in eating when they are not food secure. And if we think about this from the 2017 to 2018, almost 19.3% of our children were living in food insecurity areas. So it's a lot. 1/5 of the Latino population is a lot to say. So next slide. And if we think about what is the connection, well, there's several layers. One is a complex relationship. We know that there is this kind of hunger paradox. We know that people that have food insecurity tend to eat more dense carbs, unhealthy food, because this is what they can get. We know that there is a stress and emotional eating. So people try to eat more sweet when they are in the depression state or when they are sad. So this is just not helping the problem. There is lack to access to healthy food and as I mentioned, food deserts and places where you don't have access to healthy food, like fresh markets, things like that. And this is very common in communities where Latinos are more prevalent. And then, as I mentioned in the past, there are cycles where you don't eat, and then when you eat as much as you can because you don't know when you're going to eat again. So this is just creating a roller coaster that at the end of the day is making you gain more weight than losing weight. So at the end, we will talk a little bit about the regaining of some food. So next slide. And then Dr. Nilsson mentioned this because food insecurity is also not the same as nutritional insecurity. So food insecurity is the amount of food, but nutritional insecurity is the type of food that we eat. So if we have a lot of food, but there's nothing valuable, nutritionally valuable. That's nutritional insecurity. So we're not doing anything. So really, we need not to increase the amount of food, but to increase the amount of good food. And here I put like some examples of how things cost right now. And you can see that the things that cost the most are the most healthy things. So fresh fruits and vegetables, all fruits and vegetables, you see how much increase in price change compared with soft drinks, that decrease in price change in the thing. So we see that the system is not allowing us to have nutritional security. The system is giving us nutritional insecurity. So I tell you an example. When I was in Phoenix, one of my patients with diabetes was coming, and every time I was trying to control his sugars, it increased. There was no way that I controlled him. One time I asked him what he was eating, and he said, no, he was in a food bank. So he was getting what the food bank was giving to him. And I asked him what the food bank was giving to him. And I can tell you that probably was 4,000 calories per meal. It was a huge amount of carbs. I called this food bank and say, can I volunteer myself to make a special boxes for patients with diabetes? And the thing that food bank told me was that they get it paid by quantity, not by quality. So that says everything. So we see that even the system that we have in place to help people, they are not helping, because they are just following the money and what they are getting paid by. So this is just demonstrating that 66% of Americans do not eat at least 2 or more serving of fruit per day. Imagine. And 77% do not eat more than 3 vegetables per day. So what we are talking about is we have a big problem, not only in the healthcare system, but also in our cultura, where we based a lot of our meals on carbs, because we come from those times where for the Central and Mexico, Central America and Mexico is a lot of corn. I'm from Panama, it's a lot of rice. So there is a lot of carbs base. So we have to change that culture a little bit more. So next slide. And I just want to start finishing with a little bit of how the standard diet in the US is. And this is what it looks like: is high refined sugars, high in animal unsaturated fat, high in omega-3, not omega-6, not omega-3, high processed food, low omega-3, low fiber, and low fruits and vegetables. So look at what is the standard American diet. So that's why whenever a person comes to the US for the first 2 years, the percentage of disease that person have is comparable with the country that is coming from. So for example, if a person comes from Mexico, we have 2 years to intervene. After those 2 years, the same percentage of cardiovascular, diabetes, and obesity of the US is put in that person too. So all of this to say that it's all the system that is in place right now for us not to be successful. So we need to beat the system at a certain point. And the last, I can jump some of the slides. Just to mention, because we were talking about teens, the most vulnerable thing. And finally, this slide that I want to, because we need to invest in healthy food. And this is what you get every week in the newspaper or something. You see any healthy food in that? Nothing. Everything is about sodas and ice creams and things like that. So if we just invest on more fruits per day, we can be saving approximately 30,000 lives. And if we just follow the recommendation of USDA, we can be saving about 127,000 lives. So there's a lot of things to say with nutritional security. And I know that Dr. Nielsen would have talked a lot about this during the entire time, but that's the most important thing to really prevent complication and prevent obesity. And I think that you can go to the next slide. We can talk about that example next time. Next slide. Yeah. with this, I return the floor back to you, Dr. Nissen.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so tune in for the next session because we're going to talk about the how to, where do we go from here? Go to the next slide. Okay, so what do you all think? Let's do a poll real quick. What do you all think? If two parents are experiencing obesity, what do you think the child's or the teenager's percent rate risk is of also having obesity? Go ahead and launch the poll. There we go. Yeah, you guys were spot on. It's about 80%. Good. Okay, next slide. So one thing I did like about the dietary guidelines, there's a lot of things that are wrong. And Ricardo and I, Dr. Correa and I have had multiple conversations on this. But one of the things is that they did say, okay, let's meet people where they're at. So I like this approach because I like to ask open-ended questions, no judgment, no shame. What do you drink when you're thirsty? What does a dinner time look like? You know, do you eat with your family? Do you not? Who makes dinner? Who shops? Who cooks? So I like to just be curious. And so that's why I tell my colleagues, just be curious with teens, you know, no judgment, no shame. Because again, you don't know if they're food insecure. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And, you know, everybody knows about the pandemic, but before the pandemic, this paper was actually published in 2019, and it was talking about the syndemic. So we actually had a paper with a roadmap that talked about obesity, undernutrition, like Dr. Correa said, and then climate change, which is what I was telling you about that I'm passionate about. And it talked about all these things happening at the same time, and it called out the systems of capitalism and lawmakers who contributed to making these policies. So everything we've been talking about. And one of the things that I focus on, go ahead and go to the next slide, is the fact that if we could just be more conscious and aware, we can't get rid of ultra processed foods. We can't, but 60% of our calories in our food system come from ultra processed foods. And so I like to make sure that I just tell my teens and my families, did you know that there was a study in 2019 that actually proved that these ultra processed foods are addictive? And then on average, it disconnects your body from your brain. And so on average, you're going to eat about 500 calories or more. And then I go into it a little bit further with my teens on a different level. Go to the next slide. I go into the planetary impact on this because this is their future. This is the world they live in. They talk about climate change in schools. They're learning this through schools. And so I say, did you know that just by cutting down on those ultra processed foods, you're actually saving the planet? One bag of Cheetos at a time. You know, it's high on greenhouse gas emissions. They take up a lot of water. They take up a lot of land use. So again, there's this system that's really disconnecting you from your body, but it's also disconnecting us from Mother Earth. And to me, studies have actually shown that with teens, you don't talk about the health benefits because they don't care. They're invincible, right? They're young, they're invincible. What you talk about that's more relevant to them is actually the behavior changes of how does it socially, culturally, and economically impact them and their authenticity to live. So if someone is controlling their body and they're addictive because they're putting addictive processes in, if someone is controlling their future, that's what they're going to care about. Next slide. So again, we have an opportunity to tackle these three by just literally saying things like in an office visit. You know, I ask all of my kids that I see, because I'm a family doctor, I say, what's your favorite way to save the planet? And most of them will have an answer because they learned it through school. So they'll say, I recycle, I do this, I do that. And I say, you know what? One of mine is to leave packaged foods only when I'm out and about, not at home. When I'm at home, I don't eat packaged foods. And then I go into the why. And just by doing that makes them more aware and more mindful of consuming ultra processed foods. Next slide. So what are our opportunities? I've talked about how I love this generation, how they are authentic, they live authentically, they have purpose, they have this optimism, they're the fastest growing generation. They also have better access to health literacy. They're on social media. They know how to look things up. They have navigational, familial awareness. They have social capital. They have all these things at their fingertips. And so they themselves can define health in a better way and then enroll that to the rest of the family. So they can embrace their heritage and health. They can look at what was pre-colonization, you know, because they're globally aware, they're aware of racism, they're aware of the systemic efforts around keeping the narrative of Latino health down. And so what can we go and tap into our ancestral heritage? Well, guess what? They were plant predominant. And shout out to one of my cousins who actually they have a chorizo company, and he's more plant-based, and he developed this amazing, delicious soy chorizo that I'm super proud of in El Paso, Texas. So if you guys go check out Quicha Foods. But what they do is they live authentically towards their values, right? They want to have what's real wellness. They don't, if you tell them, you know, you should eat for your health because when you're older, it matters for you. Well, that may not stick, but if you say, hey, you know, you're Latino, to be around longer, maybe eating for your health so that your voice is heard for a lot longer on this earth. That's where I think that would make that switch to them. And then again, they're the fastest growing population. They can vote with their wallet, right? Every decision they make, they can vote in elections, but also what their choices will make. And so can we invest in jobs that really change and disrupt the food system as we know it? Because again, our GDP, our Latino GDP can do that. We have that ability. And so can we invest in jobs that make the easy choice the healthy choice? Can we have more influence on our families, right? I know that teens do. They're well-read, they're well-versed, they can access health better. So I just really like this generation. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then I just defined what wellness is not. It is not social media. It's not a number. It's not your pop artist, your politicians, or a diet, or a food, or a size and clothes. It's not because you're healthy because you don't have a disease. It's really this awareness of yourself, the relationship you have with food and yourself, and then the surroundings. Who's supporting you on that journey? Is it your doctor? Is it your family? Is it your tia? Is it your friends? There is no ideal size. It's really just about living authentically with your mind, your body, and your spirit approach. And then the rest takes itself. But the next big thing is connection. And so I want Dr. Ilan Shapiro to talk about that because I know we're both really passionate about that. Next slide. Oh, yeah, last slide. So yes, awareness is your nutrition expert. Inner peace, there's no such thing as good foods, bad foods. Be aware of the environment. When you walk into a grocery store, you are being advertised all the time. You are being disconnected from your body with ultra-processed foods. Find what your soul needs and nourish it. Find the emotions, what mental health issues and what can you nourish? And that's not always through foods. Sometimes it's literally just disconnecting from social media. Sometimes it's connecting with your friends. Sometimes it's a little bit of exercise or vitamin D. Sometimes it's just sleep. But most of the time it's connection. So I'm going to drop it, leave it to Dr. Shapiro.
Dr. Nason, thank you so much. And this is actually very powerful. I'm Ilan Shapiro. I'm a Mexican physician working right now in the US for the past almost 15 years. And I do treat kids and teenagers and families and abuelas. And more than absolutely anything that I do is making sure that I need to start with me. And let me share, and if we can change to the next slide, one of the most important things that we have is, making sure that we are a community, that we are actually believing in that dream that we can actually make something different. And If you don't mind, I'm going to take you right now to a journey with me. And suddenly you're waking up, you have maybe long hair, maybe, like a couple pimples, and you're a teenager. The world around you, it's different, it's exciting. You want to actually try different things, and not to make or give headaches to your parents, but just to figure out yourself. That journey has a lot of touch points. One of them is making sure that we're connecting absolutely everything that we have around us. And when we do that, we start seeing different things. And part of the process is making a lot of mistakes. We need to make safe mistakes. And I don't know about you, but when I picture myself there, I didn't have a lot of conversations when I was a teenager with my parents about food, about the way of being healthy, about wellness, about what can I actually change for the future of my country and absolutely everything that I have around my community. Then let's figure out that part. Then you're sitting down with food in front of you, and what do you hear? From one side, you need to actually have absolutely everything in front of you, and part of that is dishes. And you see all the things that you love. You see the tortillas, the pupusas, the absolutely everything in front of you. And you start getting a mixed message. Yes, a mixed message. Like, hijo, tienes que comerte todo para que tengas el postre. You need to actually eat absolutely everything in order to eat your dessert. Then that's a double whammy, where you're actually putting absolutely everything in front of you. And that's not wellness, because if you see that table that I have in my mind, there's some sodas laying around in the table. There's some juices that are actually not squeeze juices. There are like processed things that we were talking about in the past couple of minutes. Then our teenagers, me as a teenager, I was getting all this mixed up messaging between what's actually one of the best parts of being a family, sitting down, enjoying a meal, and at the same time, mixed messages regarding wellness, dessert, sugars, and all these things combining at the same point. We're in a moment right now that we can start doing different things. We have heard right now the important part of making sure that we have a healthy connection with food, that our community actually knows about that. And we were talking about access, but I'm going to bring you back to the current moment. We're sitting down right now, hearing each other, but has anything changed? Well, for us, not that much, but for our children, they are living in a physical and also a virtual new world that we are not a part of, that we're not understanding. They understand it, but right now we need to combine powers. And you can imagine the frustration of, and you heard from Dr. Correa, you heard from Dr. Neeson, that when we're talking with patients, there's so much things that we can do, and other things that we just simply cannot. One of them, and that's one of the most important ones, is that imagine that you all give me all the money on the world and all the best doctors and the best technology, and you give me only one patient to cure. If you give me all the resources, me as a physician, I can only change 20% of their health. But what about the other 80%? That 80% are called social drivers of health. Those are the ones that we cannot move, give a medication for it, give a vaccine for it, have a test for it. They're the air that we breathe. We were hearing about our environment. We were hearing about our green spaces. Do we have one? Is it safe to go out there? Or on the other side, do we have enough resources to just go to a supermarket and not choose hunger? Do we? At this moment, not. Next, please. Next slide, please. But let me show you what you're seeing out there. This is part of the solution. Is it the only solution? No, but it's something that our teenagers and us as parents can do today. You see two smiley people. Yes, we're smiling. And yes, we're enjoying the day. That's actually East LA. And it's a couple of blocks away from one of our clinics. And that day, we were doing house calls. Imagine that suddenly in a Saturday morning, you hear like knock, 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 and you have Dr. Shapiro, your doctor, in your door. Probably the first thing that you're thinking is that, what's wrong, doctor? Did something exploded? What happened with my test results? Are you coming here to give me bad news? But in reality, on each door that we knocked there, each time we were doing something that it's one of the most important things. We were talking about civic health. We knocked on their doors and asked their teenagers, their parents, everybody else, if they knew what was happening in November, if they were registered to vote, if they were already having a plan to do so. Then as physicians, all the frustrations that we have, all the pain that we have, all the limitations that we have around us, we need to encourage our teenagers, if we really want to change the system, if we really want to change the way that we're eating, if we really want to have more opportunities to have a healthier life and a healthier community, it starts with us. We heard the important numbers. We're growing, we're producing, we're being part of the solutions of a lot of the problems that we have here in our country. But are we represented? Are we really driving that change? And in reality, next please. The opportunity here is that we need to figure out a way to understand that my vote is my health. That connection between our communities and where we live is extremely connected. And I'm going to give you an example. If you ask me right now, and we have the maps for that, where are the lowest propensity voters? Those voters that can vote or can register and usually do not go out there and actually are represented. And you correlate it with diabetes, mortality, maternal mortality, lack of vaccine, any medical chronic problem that you can imagine, they are on the same path. Our clinics, our communities that we serve right now, they have that problem. And the only way that we can actually drive that part, making sure that we have that comida, that food that it's actually energetic for us, is making sure that we're taking care of about our mental health, our physical health, and our civic health. And our teenagers understand this. At the moment that we encourage that path, and it doesn't matter if you vote for the purple party or the gray party, or no, the important thing here in the message is that we need to be there. What happens, and that's clear in LA. If you go to certain zip codes, let's say Beverly Hills, they have at least 3 or 4 times more opportunities and places to vote than El Monte or East LA. Then we need to start closing that gaps. We need to participate, because if not, we're going to continue having the same cycle. And the cycle is having undernutrition, having lack of resources, fresh food, the things that we need, lack of green spaces, lack of schools, lack of opportunities. Familia, our teenagers carry an amazing voice. They understand more things that we actually knew at our own age. Remember that time that I was traveling with you and we were seeing all that table, well, let's hear them out. This is not a fight about social media. This is not about mental health. This is actually even larger than that. It's creating a space where we can all sit down together in a food with the amazing dishes that Dr. Neeson actually prepares, with having all the opportunities and having Dr. Correa and myself sitting down on that table with healthy, future, amazing leaders of our community. And it starts with food, and it starts with movement, and it starts with sleeping, but also it starts with representation. And that's with that, my queridísima doctora, thank you so much for the opportunity for this. If you want to have more conversations regarding that, please follow both my health. There's a lot of information, and especially right now that we all need to be part of change. We all need to be together. If not, we're going to become the main dish. And we know that that's not healthy.
Awesome. I didn't go to the next slide. Thank you so much, Dr. Shapiro. You said it well. The foundation is civic health, our family, our connections. And this is just the culturally centered Mediterranean diet. It integrates foodways, enhances our agency, and reduces health risk disparities. And to go over that a little bit more, Dr. Antonio Miranda, who is an expert in behavioral health and behavioral changes, how do we get there? Go ahead and go to the next slide. He's going to take us through that journey.
Thank you. Man, you guys have me super animado. Dios me ayude. Y'all have my adrenaline going with such great talks. I actually want to go a little bit backwards. If y'all could advance the slides 3 or 4. I'm going to start with my book. Keep going. Keep going. Couple more. Right there. I think the image was cut off. One more slide, please. Okay. So just given all amazing information that's been shared, I want to start with my book as opposed to ending with it, because ultimately the theme of this is that we really care about our teenagers. You guys probably care about them more than I do because I don't have teenagers. I don't have kids yet. But the truth is that we all want our generation to succeed, our parents' generation to succeed, and ultimately the next generation to succeed. A few books that I would encourage you guys to read that are not my own, if you're really trying to understand Mexican culture, and Angie, I forgot to send these to you. This is one, El Porqué de los Dichos. Sorry, it might be, or I'll just share the link, but it's called El Porqué de los Dichos, Sentidos, Origen de los Dichos y las Frases. But then the other one that I would highly encourage is called El Laberinto de la Soledad, The Labyrinth of Solitude. And both of those are great books to read that will help you understand. So, for example, in The Labyrinth of Solitude, similar to what Dr. Neeson was saying about how the teens today are doing a little bit better of a job compared to what our generation did in assimilation, because it was difficult, right? Our papas are from Mexico, from Panama. We're the first generation. Who are we? Am I my Americano peers, or am I my Mexicano sombrero wearing tios? Who am I going to become? And you really don't know when you're a teenager. You're going through that identity crisis that everybody goes through. And the reason I bring up the book, El Laberinto de la Soledad, The Labyrinth of Solitude by Octavio Paz, is because this is something that's going to continue on for every generation. The more we learn about it, the more we can help the next generation. In that book, Octavio Paz writes how the Mexicanos who came here in the 1940s were stuck between being rejected from the Mexicanos that were already here and being totally rejected by the Americanos that were here. So that's why it's called El Laberinto de la Soledad, because we get stuck in this no man's land, this no man's cultural region where we're not accepted into any of the cultures. So thankful have our own culture where being first gen, second gen. But anyways, all of that to say is why I was inspired to write my own book, which is, as you see here, Diary of a First Generation College Student. I think Janice is sharing in the chat the ebook, the paperback book. The ebook is now available. It's on my website. I had to move it off of Amazon because Amazon was being kind of finicky. But the paperback book will be on Amazon this coming Monday in the evening, I believe. Now, I didn't write this book because of me. Notice my picture's not on it. My picture's nowhere on the book. At that, even though that's actually my arm, and that's ultimately the reason I wrote this book is similar to what our topic of today is. How do we equip the next generation? How do we make sure that the next generation of teenagers make the right financial decisions? Because we can say, mijo, and here's the problem, and a major theme of the book, mijo, go pursue whatever you want, pursue your passion, pursue your hobby. But when we tell that to the students, I've been a professor before, to the next generation, sometimes that leaves them worse than the previous generation. We tell our students, our kids, to go study something where they're going to make $40,000 to $50,000 when their parents were doing better and they get in debt and all this stuff. So this book is about real talk to the next generation, about preparing them to pursue their passion in medicine, but their passion in business. Some kids don't need to go to college. And imagine if you're in California, you're an 18-year-old guy or 20-year-old girl, and you want to start a lawn mowing business. You'd be rich instead of going to college. So the book is about real talk. So if you guys don't mind, I can read a little bit. Is that all right, Dr. Neeson? I have a few things to share from it. So a little bit about the book, Diary of a First Generation College Student, is on the front. It's stories that I compiled of myself, but of my peers who were first generation college students or first generation pioneers. So I'll read to you the very first page as an introduction and how I set the tone for the book, teaching students, hey, look, being a first generation college student doesn't have to be a disadvantage. It can be the best advantage of your freaking life, for lack of a better term. And it should be. And I hope that's what we're teaching our students and equipping them to do. So page number 1. Move this here. When I started college, I was a confident but unknowingly clueless freshman student. My dream was simple: pursue my passion and make my immigrant parents proud. I was in school for a decade, from August 2012 to August 2022. Yes, you read that right, 10 years. You guys who became endocrinologists and family, you guys were in it for 20 years, so congrats to you guys. Y'all should write your own book. But this book is a tribute to you guys. I'm a first-generation college student turned PhD. Like my parents, however, my knowledge did not come from my diplomas. Though my parents never stepped foot in a college classroom, they earned their PhD in life. Likewise, over the course of 10 years, I earned my PhD in nutrition, but simultaneously my PhD in life as a first-generation college student. In my success, I gained humility. In my suffering, I gained wisdom. These are my stories. Take from them what you can. They will likely be your stories too, from first-generation college student to whatever you choose to be. Si se puede, si se pudo, y siempre se va a poder. And I write that because so many people here, you guys should all be proud of yourselves, because through your will, through your animo, through your family support, you guys became MDs, PhDs, RDs, RNs, business owners. And that animo that all of us here share, that we're here willingly giving our time to help other Hispanics and Latinos, we need to pass that on to the next generation. It's how can we share that cultura of animo is one of my biggest things. And so I wanted to read just one more section for you, and perhaps the most important section. Let's see. So I have a chapter at the very end of the book that's called Chapter 9, Tips from Previous Graduates. And in that chapter, I've compiled 100 tips from 100 first-generation college students, people that became MDs that are Latino, people that became business owners that were Latino, people that struggled when they assimilated or were trying to assimilate into college. But ultimately, the main goal of this book is how can we flip the misconceptions that are leading our teens to, I don't want to say failure, but to a much more difficult life than what life has to be. What are those misconceptions? Chapter 2, Google your salary, how to choose a career you won't regret. Like I was saying earlier, a lot of times we demonize the rich. We demonize the people that make it. We demonize Amazon. We demonize, and I don't have any affiliation with those guys. But what I write in chapter 2 is, do you know what the world needs more of? It needs more good people to become rich. So if you're a good person, you should aspire to be the best that you can, because guess what? You'll be rich without pushing anybody down. You're going to lift people up. That's part of the reason I wrote this book, not because I want to become rich, but because I think it's going to help a lot of people. If I sell a million copies, I can tip the mesero that's from Mexico trying to make a living $100 on my way out. And that's what I want to teach the next generation, is make decisions that are going to honor not just your family, but yourself and your cultura. And the best way to do that is to make smart decisions. And not only that, but just kind of briefly running through it, is how can you assimilate into college and manage the stress in your mental health? When I remember when I first failed an exam with a 40 and I thought my life was over, I couldn't call my papa or my mama. They would never gone to college. I had nobody to call, and I was borderline depressed. But thankfully, all of the suffering and the strategies to overcome and the eventual successes of you guys and of me, I write that all in this book because I care about the people that I went to school with, the people like you guys, and the next generation of teenagers. So we'll go back to the previous slides, but I want to finish by inviting you in the chat. Share with your networks. I don't care if I sell one copy, if I sell 1 million copies. I just really wanted to get into the hands of the students that need it the most. So, and I'll go through a few things on teenage health. All right, so very important, teenage nutrition. I'm not a pediatrician, I'm a dietitian, so I had a lot of referrals from pediatrics. However, I lived it as a kid. This is me on the left, the true blue and the kid in the red. I was a really cute gordito, right? That everybody loves as a kid, but then as you get older, like it's not, they kind of, it's cute initially when you're a kid and they're calling you gordito, but then they call you gordito as a teenager. And that's kind of one of the flaws in our cultura, right? Where it's not really helping us. But the reason I share these stories is, how can you motivate your teenagers if they're not listening to you? Because I lived it. I wasn't listening to anybody but something. So behavior change in Latino children, Latino teenagers, and in teenagers in general, it's typically purpose or peer driven. You've heard that you're the average or the sum of the average of your 5 most common friends. Well, if 5 of your best friends join the soccer team and get into great shape, not talking about body shaming, but just talking about fitness and cardiovascular system, well, guess what? The one that's left behind is probably going to go join them. So that's how it can be peer. In my case, it was purpose driven. I was so chubby that when I went to football practice the first day, I envisioned myself catching the game-winning touchdown. But then they said, hey, go train with the linemen. I said, I don't want to go train with the linemen, but I didn't know that I was kind of heavier as a kid, so they were putting me with the lineman kids. So ultimately, I lived the self-determination theory, which is what you see over here on the right, which is a theory that's utilized with teenagers in terms of behavior change with health, which is teenagers change when they feel related to that change. I'm going to change because I want to become a better point guard. I want to become a better striker in football. I want to become a better whatever, right? Because kind of like Dr. Neeson alluded to or mentioned, is that you can't say, hey, this is going to reduce, eating less Takis will reduce your risk of cancer. If we just said that, they don't care. The Takis taste delicious. But what they do care about is being able to score a goal on Saturday. What they do care about is being a state champion in cross country. That's the stuff they care about. So relatedness, feeling the autonomy of, I motivated myself to do it, because if my mom told me to do it, I'm not going to do it. And then, of course, the competence. They have to feel confident and trust that what they're doing is going to get them to their goal. So, just in summary, because I don't want to go over too much, um, the reason I changed is I wanted to get in shape for sports. I watched Rocky and thought fitness was amazing. And then I felt competent because I simplified it for myself. I didn't know anything about nutrition. I just knew that if instead of eating a bunch of food in the evening, if I just ate 2 Progresso soups, and this is little 13-year-old me, if I ate 2 Progresso soups in the evening, I feel better when I go running. And that's how I lost like 30 pounds as I was getting taller. So not about the weight. It's not about motivating on how teenagers look. That can totally backfire. It's finding something that they profoundly care about and implanting that seed of, imagínate como Ronaldo echando ese golazo. Ronaldo, what does he eat? So next slide. So there are a few slides on here that you can rewatch in the recording, but these are different motivators, different angles and approaches for motivating teenagers. Next one. And then the next slide here, we did an amazing job, if you want to rewatch session 4, of really talking about cómo llegar, how to really motivate children through agenda setting, through reflective listening, through non-judgment, through motivational interviewing. So there are just so many different methods. You can use metaphors, you can use dichos, but just make sure, simplify it. You're probably not going to be able to motivate them as a parent. It's just the harsh reality of life. Send them to me, send them to the doctor that looks it's going to work ultimately. Next one. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the reason I'm very outspoken when I say we need to refer more to dietitians is because what really helps is equipping the students or equipping the teenagers with specific strategies. Like what I have on here is, yeah, this is mostly processed food, but we're hopefully choosing processed food that's more nutrient dense and transitioning to less processed food. So what I have on here, one of the fun ones that I teach a lot of students or a lot of teenagers that come to see me is I say, what about a chaffle for breakfast? Cheese and eggs, put it in a waffle maker, great protein, calcium, dairy, watch out for the saturated fat, of course, but just they can make it so easily, lower carb, great protein in it. These Clio bars, amazing little Greek yogurt bars that taste like a Snickers, like a cheesecake, but it's perfectly portion controlled. Or things like whole grain crackers that have fiber added to them that are going to help. All right, just give me 30 more seconds. Next slide. And then intuitive eating, Angie, if you want to talk about that while you're prepping, but just make sure you have to be very careful because it's a slippery slope with teenagers. I didn't count my calories, but I would encourage, if you're going to count something, maybe only protein and fiber, because we don't want to teach them to obsess about numbers. We want to teach them to eat intuitively, hunger fullness scale, taking a break in between their meals. Go watch a video for 5 minutes and then come back for seconds if you're still hungry. But strategies like that, not forcing the body stuff down their brain. One more slide. And the last thing I'll say is the best thing that we can pass onward to the next generation is ánimo. So many of us, and especially in the lower income communities, we lose our ánimo because we're just beat down by the world. We're beat down by the finances. We're beat down by all of the stressors in life. But if we can really share our ánimo with the next generation, which I'm trying my best to do my part with my book, and you guys are doing an amazing job, the best thing in the world we could pass on is our ánimo. And the only way to do that is to be an example. So you guys are awesome, all the speakers, and I'll pass it over to Neeson, who's got a great recipe. Sorry I went over by 2 minutes.
Oh, you're all good. This is going to be a very quick recipe. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we've been doing a series on,
Couple more slides, I think.
Next slide after that. Taking us through the taste of Latin American heritage. And this is through the Old Ways program. And again, egg on my face, telling my mom like avocados are bad. All right, let's talk oils, right? These are good oils. So I always like to make sure that, you know, these are convenient, they're great, they're packaged, yeah, but they're just seeds, right? These are pepitas. So I'm gonna make a recipe today. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Nuts and seeds. You know, I always like to talk about nut butters, and they're easy. You can put them in your backpack, you can put them on, just carry them with you. It's a good source of fiber, good source of protein, kind of keeps people full. Can you hear me? Okay.
You still have an echo, Angie.
Okay. We'll turn off that one. Okay, go to the next slide. Okay. So this is a Mayan pumpkin seed dip. So usually when I have patients in my room, I always say, all right, give me the 5 ingredients to guacamole. And then if they can name those, I can see, all right, I know where their culinary literacy is. And then I can say, all right, what are the 5 ingredients to salsa? And if they can come up with those 2, then I know that they're ready for siquilpac, right? This is a Mayan pumpkin seed dip. It's delicious. It's protein filled. And again, it's like, again, we're talking about planetary health. So making sure that meat doesn't take place of protein. Protein can come from other aspects too, vegetables, legumes, peanuts, beans. So this is the Mayan pumpkin seed. So you can go ahead and take off the slides, remove the slides so we can do full demo. Okay, all right. So in ancient times, we had the molcajete, right? We don't have time for that anymore. We've got a food processor right here. So again, 1 cup of pepitas. You can get these from the package. You can get them from the bulk that they have. These already have salt, so I'm not going to add salt to the extra added dip. I have some garlic. I'm not even going to use my garlic clove presser because again, everything's going to go in here. If I was trying to make it smaller and do the molcajete, maybe I would. But this is about 3 cloves of garlic. These are some tomatoes I grew, but they're fire roasted. So I just put them on the comal and I'm just going to throw them in there. It's about half a cup. You could also do, you know, canned if you wanted to. But what I love about this recipe is that it brings us back to our ancestors, right? It's something different. It's something cool. It's something that not a lot of people know. But like I say, with guacamole and salsa, those are our salads. And so can this be like our next salad as well? So a bunch full of cilantro. I'm gonna put some lime juice. That's about a lime. And then I'm gonna throw the zest in there because again, gives it lots of flavor. And then, like I said last time, green onions, you do not have to buy green onions anymore. When you buy your first green onion, just plant this little part back in and you'll have green onions forever. So I'm gonna just throw the green part in. And then I'm gonna put a jalapeno. So one way to find out if a jalapeno is actually really spicy is to cut the top and then check the top onto your tip of your tongue. And actually jalapenos are not very spicy. In fact, fun fact, the things that my uncles were growing in northern Chihuahua were actually chiles and jalapenos. And so I can tell you they used to be very spicy and now it's all serrano peppers. All right, so I'm gonna throw this in here, fire roast it again, put the lid on. Oh, it smells so good. For some reason the tomatoes are not going through, but is in the interest of time, just to kind of show you what it would look like. It's like a Mayan pumpkin hummus. And so you blend it up real well. This is going to take a little bit more time, but you can put it on, eat it as chips and dip. You could also just put it on some sandwich and take it on the road with you. But this didn't require any preserving. The nuts have the oil, and so that was the natural preservation. So it's just a really cool recipe that I like to show some of my teams. But I am very much aware of the timing. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next week on where do we go from here. As you can tell, nutrition, especially for teens, is just the gateway to a good conversation about actual health, civic duties, planetary health, food insecurity, relationships with food, ánimo, their future. So it can lead to a lot of different things. And so I hope that this has been inspiring for you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neeson, and everyone. You were amazing. Dr. Shapiro, Dr. Miranda, and who am I? Dr. Correa. We'll see you guys next week. Please be sure to register and sign up for your CME. We'll see you soon.